How to measure scoliosis on an X-ray. Scoliosis is the development of an unnatural sideways spinal curvature. Scoliotic curves just don't bend, but they also rotate, making the condition a true three-dimensional problem. Scoliosis curves also have to be a minimum of 10 degrees on a Cobb-angle measurement to be considered scoliosis, and the rotation is typically into the concavity of the scoliosis. We also know scoliosis is a progressive condition, meaning it in its very nature to worsen over time. A patient's Cobb angle is a measurement that's determined during a scoliosis X-ray, and this involves drawing lines from the topmost tilted vertebra to the curve's most tilted vertebra on the bottom, and drawing lines and comparing the tilt of each of these vertebrae to each other. This angle is expressed in degrees, and typically the higher the Cobb angle, the more severe the scoliosis is. Scoliosis is measured into 4 different severities, and mild scoliosis cases are typically measured between 10 and 25 degrees. And this is where we consider it to be a mild scoliosis. Once it breaks 25 degrees, but less than 40 degrees, this is where we call moderate scoliosis. Greater than 40 degrees is where we start considering consider it to be a severe scoliosis or classification of severe. And then I like to use a 4th category, which is very severe scoliosis, and this is when curves are 80 degrees or greater. Now, the severity range can be somewhat deceiving because sometimes mild curves may have severe effects or severe pain. Sometimes patients with severe scoliosis may have no effects or no pain. The degree of scoliosis is not always associated to what you feel, but the degree of scoliosis can be related to what you see. So as curves get more significant, you're more likely to see more significant postural misalignments. Now, an X-ray by far is needed to diagnose scoliosis, but it's not the only thing that we use to determine actually how severe scoliosis is. We also can use different things like MRIs, and we also can use posture to actually determine scoliosis. But X-rays alone are the number one way of confirming the diagnosis of scoliosis and where the scoliosis is located and whether there's compensating curves or not. So X-ray imaging can not only tell us where it's located, but if we do X-rays with movement, meaning a patient where they're bending left and right, we can also determine how flexible a spine is, and this can help us predetermine how responsive a scoliosis will be to treatment. So not only can it tell me where it's located, it can also tell me how stiff a spine is. It can also tell me how a patient can also respond to treatment if the curve is flexible. Now, when we look at scoliosis, there's different types of X-rays. Now, standing X-rays are taken while a patient is standing, and this is by far the most common type of scoliosis X-ray that we tend to take is a standing film. But a lot of times we could take seated X-rays or X-rays while the patient is laying down. Now, these X-rays can be used to determine different things. A seated X-ray, as we sit somebody, they tend to compress their lumbar spine a little bit more, but they tend to take the pelvic alignment or leg length out of the equation. So we can see what changes from seated to standing to help us determine whether there's a pelvic or leg length involvement. Also, X-rays, we can also look at growth plates. So if the patient is still growing and developing, we can see if their growth plates are open, which can help us determine whether that we believe the case is going to have a chance to progress. And we know most progression happens during certain times of growth, so we can get this piece of information from X-rays as well. Now, we know every case is unique, but how often X-rays are performed for each scoliosis patient is unique. Now, we know for adolescent scoliosis patients, during growth, they're at the most risk for rapid progression. So typically, we order X-rays much more often at this time because we're concerned about progression. Typical orthopedic management of scoliosis is typically X-rays are taken somewhere between 6 months to a year. Now, I don't like going just off time because somebody can go in for an evaluation today, have a relatively mild scoliosis. They can leave that evaluation tomorrow, start to go through a growth spurt and grow significantly in a period of 6 months to where they go back into for their next evaluation, and the curve has gone from mild to severe, and they skipped the whole moderate stage because of how much they grew in 6 months period of time. So I like to use time and also growth. So if a patient grows like an inch or so, and I'll use that as a time to evaluate, or I'll use time. So if they grow 6 months or an inch or so, depending on where they are in their growth stage, I may consider an X-ray sooner to help gauge progression. So it's based upon growth and it's also based upon time. It's both things. Now, in adolescent stages, this is when cases are most volatile. I've seen curves progress 20 degrees in 6 weeks. I've seen curves progress 60 degrees in 6 months. So curve progression can be very, very fast at this time. So just going based upon every 6 months to a year very often leads to curve progression. And most patients that I see, if they're diagnosed as a mild curve, very often by the time they go in for their next evaluation, if they're growing, it just completely skips the moderate stage and they're directly into severe and then a recommended surgery. And it's a very weird conversation that the patient has to experience because they're told their first time, oh, it's mild curve, don't worry about it. They come back 6 months to a year later, oh, the curve's severe, now you need surgery. And they're like, well, why didn't you tell me? Like, a lot of times, most patients are not told what can happen during growth and development and not told how fast curves can progress and how quickly the curve can go from mild to severe. And then they're never told that if the curve becomes severe, that you're looking at rods and screws in your spine that are going to be in there for the rest of your life. So all these things have to be considered. So I like to treat scoliosis as soon as we find it. So the way we measure a Cobb-angle and where we find the Cobb-angle, and when we look at all the growth plates associated with it, and whether the spine is flexible or not, these are all key factors in terms of treating a scoliosis and reducing the curve so the curve potentially doesn't progress into more severe standards or severe classifications where there possibly needs surgery. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this information helpful. If you'd like to hear about other topics and information on scoliosis, type in the comments below and let us know. And finally, subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified of when we publish content. Thanks.